Deirdre, I want to understand consciousness, and to understand what consciousness is, we have to understand all the other things that are part of our mental lives that are not conscious. Now, whether you say subconscious or unconscious, technical terms and different definitions, but what are all those things underneath our consciousness? And specifically, let's look at dreams.
Well, one of my books is called The Committee of Sleep, from a John Steinbeck quote, which is, whenever a problem is too difficult by day, I give it to the Committee of Sleep, and in the morning, the answer is there. And I picked that phrase, the Committee of Sleep, because I really think that describes the unconscious in general and dreams in particular very well, that I don't believe it's like all primitive, childish things like Freud thought, or all wiser things are in the unconscious, but it's really just literally anything that our consciousness is not focused on at a given moment. So it's all kinds of more primitive things and other modes of thinking, and just things that we don't have space for in consciousness.
Well, consciousness, we think, is the only thing that we're doing, because by definition, it's the only thing we're conscious of.
But it's not at all the only thing our brain is doing
Right,
at
exactly,
any one
exactly.
time.
And in fact,
so committee of sort of disparate entities really
right. That's
seem
very
to
good. That's very good.
sum
Well, what
it
are some
up.
examples in dreams that you can clearly see are the result of some of these subconscious or unconscious activities that bubble up?
Well, in the research I've done on problem solving, about half of the examples, both in the sort of mundane ones that from college students doing my specific research projects, or that I've collected from more major professionals telling sort of their greatest dream breakthrough. In about half of each category, you see a dream that is struggling with the problem. The person either just thinks of the problem in its usual waking phrasing, or there's some very metaphoric thing, a problem about sides of some chemical molecule has become tents or pyramids or something. But you see the problem being struggled with, and then at some point in the dream, there's a breakthrough. Now that's very interesting, but I think that's happening in the dream state, partly because you can visualize things so much more, partly because all of our usual prejudices about how not to approach it that lodge in our prefrontal cortex are kind of damped down. And that's very interesting, but I wouldn't completely call it unconscious. I think of dreams as just an altered kind of consciousness.
Sure.
But then the other half of the problem-solving dreams look like the answer is there at the start of the dream, and another character or just the dream itself is trying to tell it to the dreamer. Some of these are the clearest in some of the research that's on incubating answers to brain teasers. One example, a man who was trying to dream a problem I'd given him, which is just what two English words are homonyms, as in sound the same, but mean absolutely opposite things. And the answer is raise, R-A-Z-E, and raise, R-A-I-S-E. And this man dreamed that he was at a beach, and the sun's rays came down and shone on this area of sand, which is, he's got another homonym in there before even the target words appear. And then the sandcastle sort of grows up out of the sand without anybody specifically making it. And then a wave comes and smacks it down, just the way the knocking balls do the real buildings. And he's thinking of it as sun's rays, and he's thinking of the sand as raising up, and he's thinking of it as getting raised. So he wakes up knowing the answers. And yet it doesn't look like he or anything has worked it out in the course of the dream. It looks like it was there, whether it was worked out by his waking mind or some other stage of sleep, or earlier in that rapid eye movement part of sleep that he doesn't recall. But the dream seems more like a time when censorship is down and other non-conscious parts of the self can get can get heard sometimes.
How about the opposite kinds of things when there's stress or trauma? How are dreams affected then? Because the trauma is oftentimes like post-traumatic stress disorders are below the level of consciousness, and they bubble up and they force themselves into consciousness.
And nightmares are a very prominent symptom, and they're really different from other nightmares. They're more repetitive and exactly the same. They're either literally the trauma that's happened, or sometimes they just have a little bit of surreal distortion, or very often they sort of go one step further than what happened in waking life. If somebody was threatened with being shot, the person actually pulls the trigger in the dream. But they're fairly realistic, and they're very repetitive, and they're just horrible. It's like having the trauma happen, being raped every night or having your house burned down every night. It just, they're as vivid as the experience. So everyone that has post-traumatic nightmares is extremely disturbed by them. Whereas other nightmares don't necessarily disturb people having them. Some people hate having those nightmares, but some people actually enjoy it.
Like going to a horror show.
Much more variation, in those just idiosyncratic nightmares. But post-traumatic nightmares are always horrible. They also can happen across any sleep stage. Most other dreams happen in rapid eye movement sleep, and the post-traumatic nightmares are happening across sleep stages. And in fact, some theorists think that the daytime flashbacks that we get are really REM-like imagery intruding on the waking.
It sounds like there's an emotional content to dreams more so than in waking life, that's what makes dreams have an extra special nature to them.
Emotions and the visual vividness. I mean, early dream researchers started out making up scales of, how much the imagery in dreams was, half as vivid as when awake, on up to as vivid as when awake. And very quickly, subjects were telling them, no, I saw this more clearly than I would see something in waking life. And indeed, our visual imagery area is more active than at just about any other time. So I think the vividness of not all sensory experience, but visual sensory experience, and at least some of the time, the emotions can be as much or greater than awake.